and welcome to my video. My name is Grayson Gaynor, and some things about me are that I love dogs, I'm a rock climber, and for as long as I can remember, I've had Tourette Syndrome. Along with having a mild case of OCD, which goes very hand in hand with my disorder, having Tourette's means that I have tics. A tic is an abrupt, purposeless, and involuntary vocal sound or muscular jerk. They can involve any body part and may vary in severity, from mild and hardly noticeable to very disrupting, frequent, and severe. Sometimes people can stop themselves from doing a certain tic for a while, but eventually, in most cases, your body will end up doing it. Having tics is a little bit like having hiccups. Even though you might not want to hiccup, your body does it anyways. Depending on the type of tics a person has and how long their tics last, person might be diagnosed with a tic disorder, or in my case, Tourette syndrome. In this video, I'll be interviewing people with tic disorders and having them share their experiences and how it's affected their lives. I hope that as a viewer, you can learn a bit about tic disorders and clear up any of the wrong ideas that you may have had. If you're confused about anything that we say later in this video, feel free to come back to this moment and check on the glossary to read the definitions. Please enjoy.
Okay, tell me about yourself.
My name is Ravana. I'm 19 years old. I have Tourette syndrome. I'm a bottled blonde. I spend most of my days making art, reading, writing. I play the guitar. I'm an avid Twilight fan. I go to art school for creative writing and drawing and painting.
A lot of hobbies and interests. Always picking up new ones. So currently it's drums, which is why I just came back from rehearsal. Guitar, magic, shortwave radio, lot of hobbies. Too many to go into. I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. And when I was diagnosed, it was a very long time ago. And I kind of feel like there's a general awareness of it now. But there wasn't then. We'd never heard of it. Nobody knew what it was.
My name is Kelsey and I have Tourette's. I've been diagnosed with it for about a year. Something about me is that, shut the fuck up, sorry, that I've done ice skating for 7 years. So I was an ice skater, a figure skater, and that's something interesting about me.
That's super cool. Do you find that when you ice skate that your tics are less prominent?
Actually, they're less intense, of course, because I'm focused on what's happening around me. But definitely when I'm like not focused with anything and I'm just being me, they're not that bad. But like right now, since we're talking about tics, they're kind of like present.
How long do you know you've had a tic disorder versus when were you diagnosed?
Well, I mean, I've had Tourette's basically from when I was about 3 years old. Although I didn't really know what tics were until way later in my life, probably around when I was 11 or 12 or something. So I never really researched it or talked to a doctor about it or anything.
Ew.
So I didn't get diagnosed until much later. I think I got diagnosed probably like 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh.
It was pretty like straight on. Like I went to my first time going to a neurologist. Oh my God, he did this like super basic ass thing. He like looked in my eyes and then he like asked me to like touch my finger to his finger and then all that fucking stupid shit. Or maybe not stupid sometimes, but that's basically all he did. And then he was like, "Oh, you're perfectly fine." And I was like, "What the fuck? There's no way." So I ended up seeing a bunch of more doctors, and then I eventually got diagnosed with Tourette syndrome.
I was diagnosed around February to March, somewhere there, because it was right when I got out of the residential and mental ward. So it was around February to March.
I think I was diagnosed in maybe 1980, 81. And it took... I remember having tics as early as 3 or 4 years old, so it took a long time for them to find out what it was. Everyone was kept telling my parents that I was looking for attention.
Your parents used to always just be like, oh, it's just your way of expressing anger or expressing emotions. And I'm just like sitting here like convulsing for hours straight and just like having tick attacks, and like I'll literally be perfectly fine, not even angry, just like ticking and being like, what the actual fuck? So, yeah.
So do you feel like with that there's a stigma around ticks?
Now, much less so. I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel that it's much. People know what it is. It's better understood. Mental health and mental awareness is better understood. Back then, definitely, I think there was more of a stigma, for sure.
I mean, there's definitely the whole aspect, especially with Tourette's, that like tics is just like swearing and profanities and whatever. And then there's the other side where it's like, oh, like it's just like cutesy, like ooh-oos and like fucking gross shit like that. And then there's I guess a mix of those two things and people just being assholes. A lot of people also think that like Tourette's or like tics is like something you just have when you're a kid. And so there's this like a lot of people say like, oh, you'll grow out of it, or like adults don't have Tourette's or tics or whatever, like it'll go away, like, but in reality for a lot of people like it doesn't go away. And I personally don't expect mine to go away. They've only seemed to have gotten worse as I've gotten older. I do know people though who have been diagnosed with like Tourette's, and now as they're older they don't have like any tics at all. So I guess there is like a balance between a few of the stereotypes and other people's experiences.
I definitely do think that, because a lot of people, I'm pretty sure you can tell that on TikTok there's a lot of people fake claiming, a lot of people saying you don't look like you have Tourette's, or that's not how it looks like. So people think that there's like a certain way that tics are supposed to look like. They think they're supposed to look real, they're supposed to look a certain way, when in reality that's not how they look. Sometimes they look forced, they look fake. That's just how they are. And they'll be like, well, why does your voice do this? Why do you curse? You know, tics, you don't curse with tics. And they don't understand about coprolilia, about all that stuff. And I feel like there is a huge stigma and like a way that people think tics or Tourette's should look like.
How has it affected your social life or just life in general?
It was really bad when I was younger. Middle school, elementary school. I went to small schools and it was okay. And then I switched from a small elementary school to a public middle school. So going to middle school and going from the worst, most awkward time in your life is middle school. And going from that into a public one, where I went from a school where my entire grade was 15 to 20 people, and now my grade was several hundred people. It was not a good time for me to do that. And the tics just made me an outcast. That people didn't understand and know what they were was not great for my social life then.
Honestly, it hasn't negatively affected it, at least in real life. I hid it really well socially when I was a kid. And it wasn't too bad when I was a kid, like constantly, but as I got older, it got significantly worse, like slowly, and got harder to hide. Then once I wasn't able to hide it anymore because it just got way heavier or whatever. Everybody would accuse me of faking. Everyone, like even my parents, like friends, family, or like it was crazy. No one really understood it. And then I got to high school, and people were much more accepting. For the most part, of course, there were like specific people who would accuse me of faking, especially online. I started my TikTok account, an entire influx of people accusing me of wanting attention or things like that. And then eventually those people grew up and realized that they were being dicks. And they hopefully, I guess, stopped. And then I went to university, and so far it's been the best experience of my life. I go to an arts university, so everybody at my university is like insanely neurodivergent and queer and just fucking amazing. And so I'm grateful to say I haven't had to deal with anything like that in the last like 2-ish years, I'd say. But overall, I'd say like the worst thing I've gotten is definitely more of like the cutesy stuff and like the attention seeking type of comments.
Have tics stopped you from doing something, especially something that you love?
Yeah, I actually had to stop doing ice skating. I haven't done it in like since January, because whenever I'm doing it, I would like yell, I would curse, and a lot of people had problems with that. I wasn't able to do competitions anymore. Fuck. Jingle bells anymore because, like I said, when it comes to ice skating, you have to be like perfect, perfectionistic. You have to like be the ideal that they want you to be. So it wasn't really working for me, trying to stay still, doing these poses, and then all of a sudden I move my head, it's like, so it was actually really hard. Yeah.
I can't drive personally. I'm 19 and I haven't gotten my license. There's nothing that says I can't, but if I were to get my license and like drive, the odds of me getting into an accident are like really high. So I'm lucky because I live in the city, so there's public transportation everywhere. And so I haven't really needed to like drive anywhere, but if I lived even outside of the city, I'd be royally fucked. But another thing actually is that I can't write very well, especially when my tics are bad. So whenever something would have to be handwritten, it would suck because it'd be impossible for me to like properly write things or like finish with enough time or like any time to spare because I'd constantly having to erase and redo. Especially because I have a lot of hand tics as well. And even like any tics, to be honest, like neck tics, like whatever, like just doing that motion or like whatever just fucks up your entire stability, I guess.
Are you able to use a computer for most exceptions to type?
Yeah, usually I am. However, there were a few times when I couldn't, but I was fortunate enough that those experiences didn't go too poorly.
Did you ever struggle to write on paper for
My
your
handwriting was awful, and it still is to this day. I feel I was never good at handwriting. I never had control over it. And I'm much more comfortable with typing. Nobody my age was typing then, but I couldn't write clearly.
I can't really hold babies or go to quiet places like libraries or like see live theater easily or movie theaters or whatever, but nothing too like detrimental. Ew.
Do you think that you can suppress your tics?
For a certain amount of time, yes. Long period, the more you suppress it, it's going to kind of build up pressure and has to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. And nowadays we understand much more that Tourette's is very closely associated with ADD or ADHD, with obsessive compulsive disorder. So my younger brother has ADHD. He's a lawyer, but he needs medication to stay focused. I certainly have OCD tendencies in some ways. I'm very fidgety. I cannot sit still for long. Currently have a drumstick in my hand. I'm not hitting anything, but I need to be able to do this. If I don't have a drumstick, well, somewhere around here is a deck of cards. So I'll have a drumstick or a deck of cards, or I'll take a pen. So my hands have to be doing something. And I think that's part of a release mechanism to let the energy go somewhere. It's going to come out, but I can kind of guide where it comes out.
So you're able to like refocus your tics into something else?
I know which tics I have to let happen to prevent worse or bigger ones from coming out.
So you mentioned that you have symptoms of OCD. Do you find that your tics and OCD kind of go hand in hand?
I know they're related now. Again, OCD is something I didn't know anything about. And I remember I remember the moment I realized what it was, because I had serious issues with it for years. And I was taking guitar lessons in high school. And a lot of times I would stop by the convenience store next door, pick up a drink or something. And I new issue of Rolling Stone, and I picked it up because magazines were still alive then. And I remember it started talking about a guy who had to constantly check before sealing an envelope to make sure his daughter was not inside the envelope. A ridiculous statement. How is a person going to fit in an envelope? But he was so obsessed with that, and he couldn't understand. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't have that, but I recognized what he was doing. And reading this article talking about OCD, which I'd never heard of, and how it was related to Tourette's, and a light bulb went off in my head. All these things that had to be a certain way in my house that my parents thought I was crazy, part of Tourette's. I came home and I showed my parents. They're related. This is an actual disorder. And knowing it and knowing that I was not alone in this and there was a name for it made it a little bit better.
For a while, like a lot of people like denied that I had Tourette's, but I was like, I mean, even back in elementary school, I had vocal tics, and I've always had motor tics. Oh yeah, but I was like, I know I have this, and I just really wanted like a doctor to finally put a name to it. So it was definitely something nice whenever I'm in.
Sometimes it helps us when we know what it is, without a doubt.
Do you find that you're able to suppress your tics?
It was definitely easier when I was younger, but now it's much more challenging, especially since I've really made an effort to embrace my Tourette syndrome. So the more I like try and honestly not suppress my tics, the harder it is to suppress them.
I said earlier that I do subconsciously suppress them, so that means like on like me not being aware that I'm doing it, but I do, if that makes sense. Like I'll be at the store and I don't even realize that I'm suppressing it, or like I feel uncomfortable in a situation and I just start suppressing my tics. It's hard, and definitely I get tic attacks afterwards. Like in the night I would get like 3-hour long tic attacks because of me suppressing it during the day, but I am able to suppress it. So say I'm like just having little head tics, but if I try to suppress that, it would turn into hand movements. And if I try to suppress that, it'd become vocal, and then it'd start yelling. So say I were to say a curse word, like the F word, fuck you, sorry. So instead of saying that, I would try to like suppress that. And then the more I suppress that, the more my tics, I like build up this pressure in my chest and it starts to hurt. So it's just really hard, honestly. And my neurologist told me, he's like, it's just better just to say it, get a couple mean comments, whatever, but you're hurting yourself when you suppress it. So like,
Do you struggle in public, and have you ever been outcasted for your tics?
In public, yeah, like especially if I'm having like a really bad tic day. I've been like yelled at. I've had people think I'm like threatening them just by like ticking or like whatever, moving my head, or which I think is really weird because I don't know how people would interpret that as like a threat. But like when I was in high school, I'd be like walking in the halls and I'd like walk past like a dude or something and he'd like be like, you want to fight? Like, I swear on my fucking life that's happened. One of my like something that triggers my tics a lot, I don't know why, is like seeing police or security. And I used to have at least a bunch of like very violent tics where I would start yelling and like, oh, I have a gun, or I'm gonna kill people, or I have a bomb in my bag, or like something like that. And so a couple times I've been in a situation where I've had my tics been like really, really bad. And so there were a few times when I walked past police officers or like whatever and started having these tics. And there was one experience, actually, I was in the subway with my friend and this happened, and it was so bad I could barely walk. Like I was like hobbled over, like my friend basically had to like drag me through the subway. And in between my tics, I kept like trying to say like, oh my God, like I have Tourette's, like I don't mean any of this, like I'm so sorry, I have Tourette's, because I was not super afraid at the time, but it was more the realization after of like what could have happened. Yeah, I went home and I told my parents about it, and they said like, "Oh my God, you're so lucky." Like the cops just like laughed it off because they easily could have, like, they had a reason to like restrain you or like go after you. And I remember this one time I was in this like clothing store and I started having really bad tics, and I remember having to go to like the change room or whatever to try and just like sit there and like focus on suppressing all of my tics until I like could calm down, because we were like, it was again those really violent tics. And it's it was America. Like, I'm lucky I live in Canada and having violent, like, you know what I mean? Like screaming those violent things there, like, oh my God, I have a gun, I'm gonna kill everyone, like blah blah blah, was just awful. So yeah, I mean, things like that has happened. Sometimes I lose my ability to walk, and in public that's really awful.
Yeah, it's like you can't really see where you're going.
Oh my God, when I'm walking and I have neck tics or eye tics, like I completely lose all sense of direction. Like my friends will always be like, learn how to walk. Why do you keep bumping into me? And I'm just like, I'm so sorry. Like I'm ticking. I like can't help it.
I do struggle in public. I do subconsciously suppress my tics in public. I've been accused of doing drugs, accused of having schizophrenia, accused of cursing at people. Like, I would be in a store and I accidentally told this woman that she has like a fat body, but I said in a very, very rude way that she didn't look great. So I got in trouble for that, and I had to like explain that I do have Tourette's. And it was really hard. And then I have been outcasted, especially in school. A lot of kids, they didn't like the idea of someone like telling them, shut up, you're ugly, that they're ugly. They just kind of got annoyed of it at first. Like, everyone thought it was cool, you know, someone speaking in class, you know, but then after a while they're like, okay, you can shut up now, you know?
They were a factor that made it very difficult to fit in socially. We'd also gone from big cities to a small conservative city. There were a lot of reasons I didn't fit in, and this was one of the layers that made it worse.
I think the worst comment I got about it, other than like people sexualizing me or whatever, like, is I used to have, like, kind of funnily enough, a really bad ooh tic. And I would say ooh every like 2 or 3 seconds. And I had that for like 6 months. And so I got an influx of comments on social media accusing me of getting that tic from hentai. And it was the worst experience ever of getting like comments like that, especially since my TikTok page is PG and targeted towards a younger audience. So yeah, after my ooh tic went away, that kind of calmed down a bit. But I still surprisingly do have people come onto my page from years ago, like reminding me of like my ooh tic, or like they'll like be like, you were like something out of hentai, or you were something out of this, and I'm just like, that's just so, oh God, disturbing that people still come onto my page every once in a while, like trying to make me out to be this like sex symbol and sexualize my Tourette's, and like that's definitely the worst thing.
Do you think that as you've gotten older, your tics have gotten less bad?
Yes, it's been better because I was on heavy medication. Back then, there were not a lot of choices. And if I remember correctly, they put me on Haldol and Klonopin. I know one of them is for a serious mental disorder. It really turned me into a zombie. I was maybe 10 or so when they put me on the medication and turned me into a zombie. I gained a lot of weight immediately. Fortunately, I had parents who were very involved and stayed on top of it. The last time I took medication for tics was when I was 15. So I still have them, much less than I did when I was younger. By the time I was in my early 20s, it had toned down a bit. I don't know if it was getting older, and I don't know if it was learning how to control them. I kind of feel like there's a part of my brain that always has them in check. And every now and then when I get tired, when I get nervous, they're going to come back out. And I've learned, I have to let some of them out to keep other ones from getting worse.
Be honest, if you could get rid of your tics, would you?
I used to think yes, but honestly now, at this point in my life, no. But ask me again in like 5 years when I'm off in the real world and getting a job and shit, like probably.
It's not like something I love, but it's not something I entirely hate. Like there's some days where I just wish they were gone, like I'll just be in class and then I would be taking a test and then the teacher would be like, "Hey, can you be out of this room? Can you like step out for a minute? You're kind of distracting others." And it makes me feel hurt and I'm like, "Well, I deserve to be here." Even though it's a condition, people don't understand that and it's really hurtful. There's some days that people make fun of me, make fun of my seizures even. They would make seizure-like faces. So there's a lot of cons about this condition, but the pros are, this is going to sound dumb, but I get a couple laughs, I guess, in class. I used to be a nobody, but then when I got Tourette's, it's like some people were able actually to talk to me, but I think I actually would get rid of it if I'm not being honest. Thinking about all the cons, I would get rid of it.
Yeah.
But it does make you look unique, but it's not a good unique because I make bad facial expressions, a lot of hospital bills, a lot of neurologist appointments, just a lot of money goes into this condition. Wow.
What does it feel like to have a tic?
I mean, it's definitely the itch that you got to scratch. It's coming out and you can hold it for a while, but that's just going to make it bigger.
It's kind of like a targeted burst of energy. So imagine having like a really, really bad sneeze in like your neck or like your elbow. I work with kids, and so whenever they ask me about my Tourette's, they'll be like, "Oh, like why do you do that?" And I'll tell them like, "Oh, like imagine like opening your eyes and not blinking for like 5 minutes straight." And then eventually they'll be like, "Oh my God." And they'll blink. And I'll be like, "Okay, so the last 3 seconds or 5 seconds of holding your eyes open for a really long time and then blinking and having that relief, that's kind of what it's like feels like."
Have you heard about Tourette's TikTok? And what are your opinions on it?
Well, I mean, I'm on Tourette's TikTok. I was really, really, really into it in like 2020 to 2021. It's honestly such an amazing place. The people who post about their Tourette's and everything, they're really, really great people. Can I talk about like the people like faking it?
Yeah, talk about it. Go ahead.
There can be people who fake tics, but I don't think that was everyone. I feel like maybe people just felt more comfortable with the idea that they're able. It's not that they just randomly started like having tics. Maybe they've had it, but it was something that people didn't really understand. Like even in 2020, I didn't even know that thing existed or any of that existed. I barely found out about this condition just last year when I got diagnosed with it. Like I said, I didn't know anything about it, but with the whole TikTok thing, I do believe that maybe some people faked it, but not all of them. Maybe just people that saw that people were getting followers, but I don't believe that it was everyone. So just because some people may fake it doesn't mean you have to like fake claim them. Even if they are, just mind your own business. Just like leave them alone. It's like you can't tell whether it's fake or not. If that makes sense.
Ooh, I love this topic so much. I've been fake claimed like, oh my God, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And I find that like people's excuse or explanation for fake claiming is usually that like, oh, they're protecting the Tourette's community or disabled people or like people who actually have tics by fake claiming people who don't. It's not neurotypical people's like responsibility to figure out who's faking and who's not faking, because at the end of the day, even if somebody online is faking, you can't tell at all if somebody is or isn't. And like the entire internet is like shitting on these human beings for having tics or whatever. The amount of people who fake is so much smaller. than those who like genuinely do have Tourette's or have another tic disorder or whatever.
What makes my tics like kind of calm, like concentrating and stuff, it used to be ice skating, but now it's kind of like I like to do piercings and stuff. So when I like would pierce someone, you know, like I would be totally concentrated. I would have like a little head twitch, a little eye twitch, whatever, but it wouldn't be to the point where I'm like moving the needle and whatever, you know. I think that is something that I really like.
Probably playing music or even video game if I was really into it then. You know, something that you're enjoying and really focused on. The tics kind of fade in the background.
Yeah, what's very interesting about tics is like everybody with tics, at least for me, it's like rock climbing. It's like your tics will become way less worse when we're doing
Yeah, of course. You're focused. Your mind is here.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
If you see someone in public doing something that you don't understand, just try not to take it in a bad way. Try not to just assume they're on drugs or whatever. You know, you don't know if it's like a disorder or a syndrome that you don't know of. You know, it's like just try to be open-minded and understand that there's a lot of things going around, and it's just you don't know. You know. Also, Tourette's is not contagious. A lot of people think it is.
How could it? Like, how could that be contagious? You know?
Yeah, like this girl, she didn't want to be around me because she's like, "Oh, I don't want to get Tourette's." Sorry, I'm like, that's not how it works.
I think it goes along with the thing where like people don't think Tourette's is like they don't think it's like serious, or they don't think it's like any cause for concern or worry, or like it's just Tourette's. It's like, oh, like it's easy to deal with or go through. It's just little things, it's just little sounds, it's just whatever. And so people love to like pick at it in that way and like make fun of it, or just comments that are just like rude.
Is there anything else at all that you'd like to share?
I feel like everyone with Tourette's gives off a very happy vibe about it. Like everyone is very like seemingly positive and like animated and like whatever, but in reality, like it genuinely does suck ass. I personally have constant joint pain, constant like muscle pain, headaches from ticking. I've accidentally hurt myself, like I've accidentally hurt other people having tics, like said terrible things that I don't mean. Inappropriate language. In reality, it really does suck. And I think a lot of people don't take it seriously, and because of like sort of positive vibes surrounding the whole thing. But yeah, no, it's really awful. So, yeah.
Dude, that's it. Just don't let it stop you.
This is so dumb, but I'm a really bad whistler. But like,
Oh my god. I know what you mean.
you know, I just love how we're like making each other's tics like